Welcome, everybody. We're delighted this week in our weekly QL42 conversation to have as our guest Rory Kilmartin. For those who don't know Rory Kilmartin, he is an individual who has spent a lifetime researching relationships and relationship dynamics and really how people interact with each other and the science behind that, and understanding why people, seemingly kind-hearted, loving people, have these massive breakdowns which seem impossible to recover. Now, I've known Rory for a number of years. We met each other on this magical trip to the Ice Hotel in Sweden, and I was immediately impressed with Rory's commitment to this research when I first met him. More recently, Nicole and I actually had the pleasure of attending one of Rory's workshops called The Balance of Power. Now, this is where Rory presents the body of this research over a 3-day transformational experience. And the term that Rory has given to this body of research is Relational Power Dynamics. So this is what we're going to discuss. This is what we're going to explore. And I think for anybody watching, the key here is to really connect with the awareness that Rory brings in, because a lot of what's said here, it may be the first time you hear it, may not, but who knows. But if it is the first time you hear it, one thing that you'll really get from this is you'll get an experiential connection. As we start to go through these stories, you'll start to spot things and go, I've had that experience, or that explains this, or that explains that. So just by paying attention and being aware through this conversation, I feel that we can all take some gold away from this and improve our own day-to-day existence because of that. So Rory, if you will, give us an overview of relational power dynamics. In a nutshell, what is it?
In a nutshell, relational power dynamics is a body of knowledge that is based on my research findings that explains the underlying universal dynamics that occur in the fundamental characteristics of human beings. So essentially, there are archetypal natures within us. The four most famous, presented by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette in their famous book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And essentially these four universal psychic structures present in the world. And we're all just going about our lives, living, trying to have relationships, trying to hopefully do our best. And we are at the affect and effect of these universal psychic structures and the dynamics that arise from them. So we're going to go into those dynamics, I believe, during this call. But essentially, power and power imbalance is the source of most misery in our relationships. When I mean most, I want to be clear that I speak and I work with essentially kind, well-meaning, benevolent people. So for kind, well-meaning, benevolent people who on any normal day wake up in the morning and want to do right by people, it's the misery and chaos that arises in the lives of decent people that is the baffling mystery. So my experience and my research suggests that this body of knowledge that I call relational power dynamics explains the source of misery for decent people in relationships.
Fantastic. And from the outset, is there any kind of experiential awareness that you can bring into this? I mean, I know that we talk a lot about within the study about survival archetypes, and I think this is a really, really nice place to connect people from the beginning. So can you've mentioned the four archetypes, the sovereign, the warrior, the magician, and the lover.
Yeah.
With the four archetypes, you, like I say, you discovered something called survival archetypes. Can you give us a bit of an insight as to what that term means?
Yes, so we can think of archetypes, we can think of them and describe them in their fullness. So we think of somebody sort of in their 60s or 70s that's lived a full life, they've lived a life of curiosity and introspection, and they might represent these archetypes in their fullness. So what is the sovereign energy in its fullness? What is the magician in its fullness? And we can describe those archetypes. But on the path of maturation, where my research went to was when we're not our best, when we step out of our grounded center, when we're triggered, when we have a charge, when we're on it. Pick a phrase that you're familiar with in your own life, like, I'm a bit on it. It's a famous expression. And what happens is we step out of our center And I think of it as like we're off balance. And each of these archetypes present in a different way. So I'll quickly run through them. The sovereign energy, when it gets triggered, it's triggered by non-workability in the family home, in the business, in the relationship, in the world. And how they show up is they become domineering, bossy, righteous, insistent, entitled, and they need and expect things to happen. And then they'll calm down. And they're oblivious to how people experience that. The nature of survival archetypes is we behave this way and we're totally convinced and totally justified that this is obviously the only way to react to the situation. The warrior energy is more interested in the integrity of individuals they're dealing with. And if something's wrong, or someone's out of order, or someone's jumping the queue, or someone's not given the right change, they speak up. So I call the warrior the wolf. The survival archetype of the warrior I call the wolf. And the survival archetype of the sovereign I call the gorilla. And I use these animal names because they've been used for millennia. Back to the bull, Aesop's fables in 600 BC, all the way through fairy tales and through time, these animal names have been used. And I came across them myself and it made complete sense. So the wolf wants to address issues immediately, and then they can relax. So then we look at the magician realm. So what is the survival archetype of the magician? I call it the fox. The cunning fox, the sly fox, is well known throughout fairy tales and the millennia. So the fox is trying to solve problems, and the fox deals not in the left brain, but more in the right brain. They're trying to join up dots, trying to think about how to solve problems. They're very inventive and creative. They like music and architecture and problem solving, and they also bring lightness and humor. The comedians are the foxes. And they like things to be free. They like things to be in the flow. They don't want to be controlled by rigidness. So the gorilla and the fox have a dynamic tension. The gorilla wants left brain, order, detail. If you say 9 o'clock, we say 9 o'clock. If we say Thursday, we don't change, we don't break our word, we don't change our mind. And the fox is like, no, we have to be in the flow. We have to let things unfold. We have to trust the process. And the gorillas are going out of their minds. Out of their minds. And I'll get to the other point in a moment. So then we have the lover, the survival archetype of the lover I call the sheep. They don't bark, they don't bite, they don't have claws, they don't growl. They just want warm, fluffy flock, community, connection, no fighting, no conflict, and they don't speak up. Because if you speak up, you might get thrown out of the flock. So there's a dynamic tension between the wolf and the sheep. The wolf, there's an issue, they need to deal with the issue immediately, and then they can relax. The sheep, they don't want to deal with the issue at all, they want to cuddle. They don't want to address issues, they'd like to create connection, and then the issue will blend away in the rearview mirror of life. So there is a tension between the gorilla survival archetype and the fox archetype, and the wolf archetype and the sheep. And if this is all sounding a bit technical, if you're listening at home, I'll simplify it. Everyone leans strongly into one of these survival archetypes in the home. The only time there's a differentiation is sometimes people can be different at work or different with their mates playing football than they are when they come home. But I'm mostly interested in who you are at home with your beloved, on the way to bed, having a fight, tired, hungry, frustrated. How do you show up when there's a breakdown? Because people show up differently. If you have two wolves, they'll deal with issues immediately. They'll breathe a bit of fire. There might be a bit of volume, and then it'll be done, and then they'll be fine. Sheep, they won't deal with it at all. If you have two sheep together, they won't deal with it at all. They'll just try and pretend nothing's wrong, hopefully for 40 years. Good luck with that. And the foxes, I don't know exactly how foxes together deal with it. And the reason is because for the majority, people are more often attracted to the opposite. The involuntary nature of desire is easily explained biologically through our immune system. Different genes, different immune system. It's something about biology that says, okay, we should mate with here because They have more protection for the immune system. But psychologically, and in the realm of the psyche, the developmental imperative of maturation is fulfilled by being attracted to somebody who has a different archetype. So often gorillas don't want to marry each other because they like being in charge. They like marrying foxes or sheep, but they're typically attracted to the fox. Why? Because they bring lightness and humor in a way that they don't necessarily have. So they're instantly attracted. Oh my God, they're so funny. And the fox, oh my God, they're so organized. They're competent. They ground me. This is great. We're going to have great children and a great family life. And the wolf is attracted to the sheep because they have this thing that they don't have, which is like oneness and sensuality. They understand connection and how to create experiences and how to create amazing dinner parties and holidays. And they just know how to make life a bit richer. And sheep, and vice versa, are attracted. Oh, they're so strong. They're so clear. They protect me. There's something about, and this is not masculine or feminine. This is not about that. That's what's really interesting is gender roles don't play a part in this. There are plenty of female gorillas and wolves. Plenty. Let's not pretend for 1 second it's the female are gentle and the men are strong. No, that's not it at all. So not only are we attracted to our opposite, but we have this tension in breakdowns. So then the biochemicals fade away of falling in love, and now we start getting from dating, which is essentially how do I make you feel good this weekend, to we're living together. And all of your habits are there. And then we start having breakdowns, fights, arguments, pick a word, right? I call them breakdowns, but fights, arguments, disconnections, irritations, upsets. That whole realm of the human condition. And everybody deals with it totally differently, not just a little bit different. It's like a different planet, a different solar system, nay, even potentially a different galaxy. The world, let me make one more important point. These survival archetypes, it's so innate inside us. It never occurs to us that our model of the world, our paradigm of the world is wrong or incomplete, or that anybody should respond to life differently to the way we do, because it's the only thing we know. And then somebody shows up differently, and it's almost impossible not to be offended. It's almost impossible not to be highly agitated by the way someone who's not our survival archetype is handling the breakdown. So the wolf is like, there's an issue. You didn't pick up the box. I asked you to pick up the box from the post office. You didn't pick up the box. And the sheep is like traumatized. Like, why are you yelling? You've come home. It's time to be soft and gentle. And you're all cross and in my face, and you've raised your voice. And raising anger is bad. And I can't speak now. I need 3 hours to recover. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again because raised voices is wrong. It goes against connection, which is the only thing I understand. And the wolf is like, well, we just deal with the issue and then we can connect. Why have you gone quiet? Why have you gone mute? Where have you gone? Don't know if I can trust you ever again. Like, we need to know that we can deal with issues together. And then quickly to do the gorilla and the fox, the fox doesn't like being penned in, doesn't like being cornered, and doesn't like being made to commit to things. And often they don't check their bank statements, and they're not particularly good with money. And they like to be free, and they like to play, and they like to bring humor in when life gets significant. The joker, the jester, right? Merlin the magician to King Arthur. And the gorilla's going out of their minds because they like order and detail and workability, systems that work, then they can connect. And the fox is like, I can't function if I don't feel free and able to skip through the meadow whenever I want. How can I solve problems in the unknown world if you're cornering me? And this dynamic tension with this total blindness that anyone should be relating to life any other way than the only way we know is essentially the source of all power imbalance. And power imbalance is where all the misery is. Not all. I hate speaking in blanket terms. Let me be more precise. The vast majority of misery in long-term committed relationships between decent human beings is a power imbalance. It is the failure to understand the very simple concepts that I'm just sharing with you now. And you might think, surely it's not that simple, Rory. But my clients would argue that it is that simple. Understanding these 4 survival archetypes fully, in more time that we can do in this call, is, and well, you can attest because you've done it, right? It's a total revelation. Suddenly the clouds part. Suddenly the chaos of a previous relationship makes complete sense. And you realize it was never the detail, it was the power dynamic that was at play in the background. And if I can go one step further, like the full enormity of this understanding is that it liberates you from the baffling mystery that is essentially a form of bondage. And once we are liberated from the confusion, the path to balanced, calmer, more respectful, more connected relationships becomes clear. It's like, oh, I'll give you a really, really simple example. My gorgeous and amazing wife, Hannah, is a gorilla. She likes order and focus and systems to work. And when things work, she's funny and playful and relaxed. But when things start to not work, she's not. She loses her sense of humor and life gets serious. When she used to bring her issues to me, I just want to give her a hug, because my nervous system is like, if we hug and we're connected, there's oxytocin, we'll calm down, our IQ will come back, we'll feel safe, and we'll be able to solve the problem together, which is the way sheep think, because I'm a recovering sheep. Just like that at all. Don't touch me, don't hug me, let's deal with the issue, then we can hug. So it took a few times for us to figure that out. And as soon as we do figure it out, she wants eye contact. She wants me to look her in the eye and be present, and she wants to share the problem so that, and feel like I want to solve the problem with her, and then she's fine. And gorillas, for example, they don't like humor when there's a problem. They'll laugh about it afterwards, but not in the moment. And of course, foxes, they want to bring significance dispersing humor and lightness every time life gets serious. They're the jesters and the jokers, naturally. So it's impossible to fully express the profundity and enormity of understanding this material. And I'm interested in results, right? So I'm not interested in stuff that sounds good. I'm interested in stuff that works in people's lives, in people's homes, when they're dealing with the people they care about most. I'm interested in practical, applicable information that produces results.
What I found really interesting during the balance of power workshop that I came to was how in your own archetype, your reaction, like you're talking about foxes, and I turned out to be a fox, or a magician who gets foxy, that often our way of reacting to a situation, our survival mechanism, which is, as you were saying, to make a joke or to try to lighten the mood and so forth, is exactly the thing that in that moment is what triggers the other person. Because as you say, the gorilla or the wolf, it's not time to make a joke, it's not time to laugh, and it's you're really feeding the fire with your reaction, with your natural reaction. And I found that's what's really interesting, is that also the things that have pulled us together initially, as you say, that initial attraction, because the other one is different and is complementary to, is what ends up actually pushing you apart.
Yes.
And I found that really interesting. One question, and I know you presented it during the balance of power, but I found it so very interesting. I'd love you to share. What was the origin? What's the backstory? How did you get into this? What made you actually want to just find information about this or understand this system?
Well, the short version is, and my journey on this began when I was 12. I observed people say they loved each other, being tremendously mean and cruel to each other. And my young, sensitive nervous system found that incredibly difficult. And at one point, and I remember it at 12, I was like, I can never do this to the person I love. Like, I knew that I had to figure out love and relationships. And it became my obsession. And I suppose some people become obsessed with cars, marine biology, computers, Minecraft, I don't know. I wanted to figure out love and relationships. I thought everyone was doing it, but then I found out, no, I was the only one that I knew that was doing it. And I spent, my first major piece of research was into models of relationship. The model of relationship, the underlying beliefs, principles, and assumptions that are present for people who have disruptive, chaotic, and unpleasant relationships, versus people who you might think of as mastered relationships or have very highly respectful relationships. What are the underlying beliefs, assumptions, and principles that are present with those people? So I really studied those two areas of life, and I thought that I'd cracked it, and had no reason to doubt that. And I had this absolutely glorious relationship at some point when I was 25, 26, 27, and it was just astonishing. And then I had the total opposite. That relationship came to an end. She was ready for family and marriage, and I just wasn't even close, and it wasn't our truth to continue. And then I had the total opposite. It was like being washed overboard in the dead of night into the freezing ocean all alone. Totally lost, bereft of any understanding of what was going on. And then a few short years later, I had a similar experience with a business partner where I thought they were my brother, and then I noticed the worst of them coming out. And that was the second time that had happened. So I had a dawning realization, a moment of absolute self-delusion collapse, where I realized, like, I'm the problem. Somehow I'm the worst versions of the people I care about are showing up in my life. And initially it's like, it's their behavior, and all the evidence is it's their behavior. But not until you get your third visitation, like 3 ghosts from Christmas past, that's how many ghosts it took for Scrooge to wake up and go, hold on, there's something about me. And then I knew that I was missing a major piece of the puzzle, because my life didn't work. And in that moment, I stopped everything I was doing. I stopped all business, all relationships. I shut down everything, and I went to my mentor, and I said, and we started, a confluence of events happened. I was invited to do a talk. I went to see my mentor to talk about it. And then suddenly it just began. And I ended up having to move house. I said, can I come and live in your apartment? He has a business apartment where he does all his consulting, and there was a spare bedroom. And I moved in for, I don't know, 3 months. I moved out like, I think it was 5 or 7 years, 7 years later, I think. And we worked anywhere between 3 and 9 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week for 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years. And then it began to tail off. So it's tens of thousands of hours of total absolute obsession. And he was trying to solve this problem from the wolf perspective, because he didn't understand his siblings. And I was trying to understand the world from the sheep perspective. And the two of us came together, and we had this fusion of desire. And it was just this, it was the most astonishing period of my life when it comes to my professional research, to be so, to have to find somebody in the tundra, lost in the blizzard, as I like to say, who was equally as committed to figuring out the mystery. And he lives with about 7,000 books, has read many of them, and in his estimation has read the most important books he can find on the subjects of relationships and power dynamics. And none of them have explained what's going on inside him and with his siblings if he didn't understand. And then I started explaining it to him. And it was like nuclear fusion. We took off. And he started explaining my business partners to me. And I said, oh, this is absolutely no idea. And this is why I understand, the Joseph Campbell adage, like, you can't do this on your own. Maturation is not a solo effort. You have to find mentors and elders. You have to find teachers, because you're trying to solve the mysteries at the level of awareness that you have. And those are the mysteries that are presenting at the level of awareness that you have. So that was sort of the background. And then I left the apartment. I met my wife, Hannah, had this glorious love affair, and we're married. And I then started leading my workshops again, my invitation of love, the models of relationship stuff. And then the universe just organized itself, and it's like, okay, it's time to start organizing my thoughts. And then I went into my basement. I was living in Tenerife at the time. And I went into my basement. I painted my basement 22.5 square meters of whiteboard. And then I just spent 3 months. We have like, I don't want to brag, but we have like, I'd have to look up the number, but it's like 860 audio recordings over those 3 years, and hundreds of pages of notes. And we have photographs of like a dozen or more entire flip charts full. And I had to organize my thoughts and begin to present the material. And then you saw what you saw back in November. So it's really, my obsession to figure this out for myself. And then over the years, there was back in 2003, people were like, you have to write this down. So I wrote it down, and then I wrote a book, and then they were like, and they have to stand up and tell people. I'm like, what? Me? Like, I'm just a guy figuring stuff out. And then I stood up and I told people, and people received it really well. And then, so I'm sort of like a very happy but initially reluctant facilitator. I just share my findings. I say this every workshop. I'm just here to share my findings. I'm not here to impress you. I'm not here to change your mind or sell you on any dogma. If you don't like it, that's absolutely fine with me. If you want to leave, you can have all your money back. I'm just here to lay it out so we can all relax. Yeah.
When you were explaining the research during the Balance of Power, I found it very interesting because, as you said before, you're a recovering sheep, and your business partner was a wolf. And how did those 3 to 9 hours a day conversations actually go? I mean, I would imagine because you're coming from such different sides and you're going into research, it wasn't always just a nice sort of interesting conversation.
The great thing about my mentor Gil is that he is not a violent or menacing wolf in any way, shape, or form. It's not that he doesn't have the capacity to. He's very benevolent. He's very kind. He doesn't want to hurt anybody, but he's a wolf. So that really helps, right? Because I don't think it would have happened with somebody who just was a bit callous. He's not callous at all. But it literally looks like standing in front of flip charts, ripping pages off, moving them around the floor, because it's a big open main room. He has recorded thousands and thousands of documentaries over the last 20 years on every format. So we would scour documentaries at times, books, and mostly it was being adduced. It was just coming out. Like, he was able to explain a world that I didn't understand. It's kind of like when I had my James Hollis describes your middle passage begins when your capacity for self-deception is exhausted. And I remember the exact moment that happened. I was in the back of a town car on the way to Logan Airport in Massachusetts. And I was having yet another breakdown with this particular business partner. And it all went quiet like the Matrix. And it just dawned on me, it's me. And in that moment, I knew that I was missing pieces of the puzzle. And we just, Gil and I we were relentless. Like, because it's nothing short of saving your own life, this work. Because most people know that their lives don't work in this area, but not to the extent that they would know enough that it's not working, if that makes sense.
But I mean, would you trigger each other? Would you try to get into each other's sort of mind and body and emotion, or was it more of a analytical approach?
No, I think we only had there's a couple of occasions where we got triggered. No, there was a totally sincere, authentic, benevolent desire to support each other. It's a bit like, imagine you're climbing mountains and you've left everyone behind you. Nobody else wants to go on. And you go through the tree line, you go up through and you keep going, and then you're in the full tundra, like the permafrost, and you're in the blizzard and you're all alone and you're getting frostbite and your life doesn't work. And then you find somebody else out there and they've got a hut and they've figured out how to make a bit of fire, and you can hang out in their hut. Okay, no one's going to hurt each other up there. Everyone's trying to stay alive. There's enough danger of the blizzard, of mystery. So it's kind of like, we both absolutely adore each other. It was this magnificent collaboration and union that has given birth to this material. And then we later found Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, and we were like, oh, these two geniuses figured out the same thing, but they say it in their own words. And it's not exactly the same thing. What we figured out was much more focused on when we're out of balance. Because for those of you listening, if you're familiar with John Gottman's work and the Gottman Institute, John Gottman's 40 plus years of research as a relationship researcher concluded that the number one skill in relationships, the grand skill in all relationships, is managing breakdowns and reconnecting after a breakdown. And we were basically obsessing about breakdowns, obsessing about dysfunction, and how kind, well-meaning people say mean things and become cruel. And then the decent ones have immense remorse and shame. And that's fascinating to me. Like, I love my wife. And most of the time, and then sometimes I'm just really mean. I don't even know what happens. And then we go to bed and we feel dreadful.
So what
and
is
we can explain that.
Sorry.
And we can explain that.
Mm-hmm.
And using animal names.
Yeah, no, that's
which is a lot, which is kind of crazy, but it's like, I'm at best, I'm averagely intelligent. I don't have any interest in confusing people. Like, this doesn't need to be confusing. This is fundamental wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the fundamentals are easy to understand. They must be easy to understand. Mm-hmm. It's just they're hidden. The fundamentals are not easy to find, but they should be easy to understand. So I'm not interested in being all academic. No, I want to make it. I want to send my 17-year-old daughter.
Well, you see in a lot of in a lot of fables, and as you were saying, this is also, you see animals being used a lot to represent personalities, characteristics, and so forth. So I think it's a very easy connection to make, to identify yourself as an animal.
People have been doing it for millennia.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was joining them until I saw it everywhere.
Yeah. No, and it does make it easy and simple to understand it, really. So what has, for you in your own life, what has been the impact of this research and this work? Because it's been years and years and years. What's changed for you?
Okay, I'll give you a very tangible, hopefully understand, or at least the sheep listening will understand. To survive my childhood, I had to appease and placate and be a nice guy and a good boy and be very concerned about other people's moods and mental climates and try very hard not to get in trouble because it was very scary. So I was very, very good. I had no boundaries though. So when I had a breakdown with somebody, or when one of my friends would get cross with me, this would throw me out completely. And what happens to the sheep is they give their power away very easily. And that includes sheep lose motivation. It's like our horizons, our goals just come right to here. Like they just disappear. Because the only thing that matters is that someone's upset with us. So it's very difficult to live a productive life as a sheep when all it takes is someone to get cross with you and you're totally obsessing about the fact that someone's cross with you. Someone glared at you on the tube, or your friends got a bit pissy with you on Friday night drinks. And sheep will often spend hours having fantasy conversations about what they would say to that person. So this is a kind of a description of who I was. I'm a very nice guy. It's not a bad thing to be a kind, polite, generous, decent human being. People like me. It's not a bad gig, right? But the downside is no boundaries, not able to be disliked. Adam Phillips, his English psychotherapist, who I quite like, sort of said there's a vital step in the evolution of the psyche, which should occur in our late teens and early 20s when we become okay being disliked. And I first heard that at 33, and I'm like, I'm 33 and I am not comfortable being disliked. And then he goes on to say, and if this step in the evolution of your psyche doesn't happen, it will go on and cause major problems in later life. That would be me. So having done this work, and we're not even really, as you both know, we're not even really getting to the full profundity of where this material goes. When you get in touch with the full profundity of it, it literally saves your life. So I spend almost no time obsessing about conversations or breakdowns. I speak up. I address issues when I need to, when it's appropriate. I'm able to have consistent focus on my goals and my projects and who I want to be in the world. I'm able to be on a podcast like this and risk somebody saying, well, that guy's full of rubbish. you know, or whatever trolls say these days. I don't read any of it. And I have a functioning life. And you could have argued before I had a functioning life, and I would argue, well, I wouldn't have known different. So let's look at a wolf, for example. So wolf is like, wolves are all softies on the inside, not all. The decent ones are softies, right? They really want connection, but they have to deal with the issue first. If there's an issue in the space, they've got to deal with it. And they deal with it often in a heavy-handed, abrupt way that most people relate to as a bit mean and disconnected. So for the wolf, it's like learning how to maintain connection and deal with the issue in a way that doesn't scare the gentlefolk. Well, suddenly you have, because the sheep deal in the realm of sensuality and oneness and dropping out of our left brain. You know that moment in your life, and I hope that you perhaps have it now, where you fall into the arms of your beloved and you begin to drift off to sleep in the safe embrace of someone that you feel truly safe with. Okay, that's what the sheep are the guardians of. The lover is the guardian of dropping out of thought and into the vast expanse of bliss. And they know this is possible every day. And the wolves really, really want that at the end of the day when they put their sword and their shield and their armor down. But they often miss out on that because they don't know how to speak to the gentlefolk. So it's a little, and you know, the gorillas, they often feel alone. They don't ask for help. They don't know how to ask for help. And people don't offer them help because they come across as so organized. And they are the last, as I said, they're the first to lose their sense of humor. And often people don't relate to them as funny and playful. And actually, they really want to be funny and playful and intimate. It's just they can't do it if there's a problem with the bin. Or the roof is leaking. The roof is leaking is too clumsy an example. But it's like, you're taking the car tomorrow, but I need to know that you're going to fill up the car because I don't have enough time and I've got to drive Billy to violin practice. I need to know, I can't relax until you say, yeah, I'm going to get the petrol on the way home. And then you need to send a text that I've got the petrol. And then they can relax. Because the gorillas are thinking about the whole system. So again, it's difficult to impress upon you, if you're listening enough, how absolute the paradigm of each person's survival archetype is. It is absolute. I've met very few people who are like, oh yeah, I totally understand both those worlds. There are people who understand them because professionally they've been trained or they have had to show up a different way. So some people can go to work and be a wolf because they're in sales, or they just deal with people who negotiate or whatever, and then they come home and they're like, please don't shout at me, because someone else is in charge. So the impact for me personally is I have a life that works. I suffer 90% less. 90+% of my emotional, mental suffering is gone. And now I now just suffer the things that are appropriate. It's not the absence of suffering, because that would be the absence of maturation, and that's not the way life works. I'm just saying that there are really appropriate challenges, breakdowns, suffering, irritation that is consistent with your maturation. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's actually not necessary once you've figured out what we're talking about in this call. Because when you understand this material, you understand the human psyche on a level that is rare. And it's not complicated, but it's rare. And it's rare because the paradigm is so absolute for people. Like, my wife is a very, very smart woman. Like, she's a bona fide genius, academically and in other respects. And as soon as I laid this out for her, she's like, it's like, you're explaining the people that drive me crazy. Like, I know, just keep listening, we'll keep going. And it's like, this is a revelation, because this is why I get so annoyed with people. I know, yeah, they're not designed like you. They don't think about the whole system. She's a smart woman. So it's like this paradigm is absolute for most people. And then they don't understand the way people show up. And there's other stuff that we could go into. Like, there's a whole bunch of counterintuitive behavior that we all do. So sheep, for example, they can't stand disconnection. They're terrified of disconnection. And then how they deal with people is they disconnect. Gorillas, who, if you get bossy and entitled and righteous with a gorilla, they will explode, literally explode. And yet they are bossy, entitled, and overbearing when they're triggered. Wolves do not like being shouted at. They can handle someone shouting, but if someone shouts at them in a sort of a dominating way, they do not like that at all. And yet that's exactly what they do when they're really triggered. And foxes do not like being slippery, being misled, being a bit sly and cunning. They don't like it because it points something to them. But that's what they do. When a fox is under pressure, they have an issue with being sort of found out. So that's why the fox is cunning, and that's why they become a bit slippery, and pushed hard enough, they'll lie. So there's so many nuances to this material but once you understand it, and it's not complicated, once you understand it, it's like a tremendous amount of unnecessary suffering goes away. That's the personal impact. On a group impact, your personal relationships will begin to dramatically improve. And your partner doesn't have to know about it. If you're in a relationship with somebody who thinks this is all true nonsense, that's fine. They don't need to do it. Your relationship will dramatically improve just by you understanding it, because you'll stop doing the thing that brings out the worst in them, and you'll start speaking to them when there's a breakdown in the manner that they need to be spoken to bring them back into their center and not push them further out. On a larger scale, in your family home, if you are a parent and you're dealing with children, of course your children are presenting already in this way. The study of twins makes this very clear. Twins essentially are identical twins, I mean. Same parents, same house, same food, same energy, same everything, and yet they present differently. One twin, straight in the dark cupboard looking for mummy's slipper, can't wait to do this, bang their fork for the extra peas. Notice when the parent gets irritated, they quite like it. And then the other twin's like, ooh, a bit timid. They don't want to get the wine out in the cupboard. What's mommy going to say? I'm run out of peas. Can I have some more peas? Oh my God, you're frustrated with me. Please don't get from meltdown. So your capacity to parent will improve dramatically as well, because you'll not be confused by how your child is presenting. So often parents want their child to be a similar archetype, survival archetype to them. Big, rough kind of wolf man wants their son to be, rugby, football playing, beer drinking, rough bloke. Turns out timid, bit effeminate, not too sure of himself. That can lead to violation. And then you get a gorilla who has a child, and they're just all over the place. Don't talk straight, mystical, just off with the fairies, can't tie their shoelaces at the time that they did, can't give a straight answer, change their mind all the time. If you don't understand what's going on, it's just absolutely crazy making. And the problem, of course, is you get irritated with your children because they're not presenting the way you want them to present. That's consistent with your paradigm. So on a grander scale, which I'm sort of slightly uncomfortable talking about at times, but on a grander scale, I'm stunned that this isn't a household conversation. Absolutely stunned that I seem to have discovered something that is so glaring and so everywhere. And every time I stand up and I talk about it, I think, oh God, everybody knows this already. I'm wasting everyone's time. And then I get over that. And then I lay it out for people. And the smartest people in the room are like, I didn't notice. It's everywhere, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it's everywhere. It's happening everywhere. Everyone's one of these, yeah. You've just explained my marriage to me. You've just explained every argument I've ever had with my husband in 5 minutes. Yeah. And then what happens is I speak to that same person 6 months later and they have 90% less arguments. So if you love your partner, but you don't do breakdowns very well, this is mandatory. If you have any real, like honor and commitment to your beloved, and you'd like to have less breakdowns, I mean, this is just mandatory. Because it's one of the consistent people report consistently. I argue less. There's less breakdowns. It's like, to use a scientific term, the frequency, intensity, and duration of breakdowns, right? So how often, how long are they, and how intense are they? Because we want to reduce all of that. We want to have much less frequency, much shorter duration, and much less intensity. And that is exactly what happens when you understand this material. And the mistake, so the last thing is, the mistake would be to think that it's not you, it's your partner. That would be the mistake.
So you were saying before, you're surprised that it's not part of the household conversation. What is your hope for the, for the world, or what's your hope that your work will have as an impact on the world?
If you were to say to me, okay, Rory, in 30 years' time, you're winding down, you're just calming down a bit. What have I accomplished? That this understanding is a household conversation, that people have more compassion and empathy and vulnerability and strength and fortitude and assertiveness and humility and honesty. And, like, if this material reduces breakdowns and meanness and cruelty in relationships and in family homes, then I'm up for more of that. Like somebody once said to me, why do I do this? I do it because I care about the children. I don't like children being violated unnecessarily. I'm keen on less of it, but I have to speak to the adults to make that happen. A little bit like, think of myself a bit like the dog whisperer, Caesar Milan doesn't like dogs suffering, but he has to deal with the adults, the humans. And then the dogs suffer less. So I try not to think in too grand a theme, but I just work with the very next person that knocks on the door and says, I want to do this work. I've heard you and I'm ready to do the work. And I have an online workshop, I have a workbook. It's all laid out for people who come knocking, because you got to want to do it. I don't chase anyone. It's like.
So if the people who are listening to you now are thinking, oh, I want to do this, I want to start changing my life, I want to start adopting these things, what could be one easy thing they could do, like right after they listen to this? What piece of advice?
So let's just say it's not the right time for you to do my work or to study more of my material. The number one thing that I would recommend you do is be curious what's going on in your partner when they're having a breakdown. Ask questions, be curious. Like, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, like what are you trying to accomplish now? Like, or I noticed that I said something and you've gone quiet. Can you help me understand? I really want to understand. Did I speak too loudly? Be curious. Like, hey, whenever there's a breakdown, you seem to raise your voice a lot and I struggle. Can you help me understand what's going on when there's an issue? I'm really curious. I want to help. I want to understand you better. If you can really take on being curious about how you handle breakdowns and write it down, like, when my partner gets upset with me, I go mute. I can't form a sentence in my mind. I disconnect and I want to flee. And then I don't connect for a day. You have to write that down. Like, if that's your go-to strategy, you've got to write it down when you're not triggered. Because what happens is most people, they get triggered and then they act out of their survival archetype while they've got low IQ and they're on it. And then they come, the cortisol recedes, their IQ goes back up and they're less on it. But it's kind of like this kind of misty, hazy thing that happened. You actually need to be really honest, like, no, I go mute, I disconnect. You have to become responsible for how you respond to difficult situations. So you can explain it. Everyone's on autopilot. Everyone's on autopilot, and you have to stop and put the car in the garage and lift up the hood and have a good look at the engine. What triggers me? So the different survival archetypes have different triggers. What triggers me? Like the gorilla will say, like, well, thanks for asking. What triggers me? When things don't work properly. Or if people are being vague and unclear. So when a gorilla says, you know, I said I really need the car filled up, you still go, oh yeah, it's got that, yeah. It's way too vague. Yes, I know the car needs to be filled up. I'm filling it up on the way home and I've got an alarm set. Vague and sloppy and unclear, triggering for the gorillas. The fox is like, everything's going to work out. No, just get some petrol. It's fine. Crazy making. So the answer to your question is become curious about what you do when you're triggered and become curious about how your partner deals with it when they get triggered. Because that's where all the violation is. Not all. I hate absolutes. The vast majority of the violation is when people are triggered.
And if somebody, obviously Nicole and I were fortunate enough to come to a workshop a few months back, and it was a game changer, absolute game changer.
It was a great weekend.
A
great group.
One of those milestone moments in one's path to maturation. But for anyone watching this who wants to really tune into this work at that level, you know, is going to take this tip, is going to bring curiosity in their home, but then looks at it and thinks, you know, I want to go deeper. You know, I want to have that milestone experience. I want to have that trigger for maturation. I want to be a fuller version of myself for everyone that's close to me. What's in place for them now? How can they study that work?
I just want to point out that we're in COVID times now as we record this, right? People are stuck in isolation, and the figures coming out of Wuhan, China, is that the divorce applications for divorce are skyrocketing. It's like they say that there's more houses on the market in January because at the end, the year ends and people calm down and they relax and they get stuck at home with their partner that they've been avoiding playing golf and going to work all year. So people are stuck at home, and if you're stuck at home and you're struggling because you're baffled and confused and upset by how your partner's showing up, if you do want to do more of this work, this is just a very simple step. It's to go to a website. I'm assuming the link will be somewhere, but it's relationalpowerdynamics.com. relationalpowerdynamics.com. And there's an online course because we can't do live events. So I've created an online course with the footage of the last workshop, the workshop that you guys were at. And there's a COVID-friendly price because we're all stuck at home and money might be tight. If you're watching this podcast and you really, really are interested, you can send me an email. Say, hey, I just watched your podcast. My name's whatever. I'd really love to do this work. I would be thrilled to receive your email. I will respond. Doesn't matter how many I get. And we can have a conversation if you want, and we can help you get underway. When people knock on my door because they want to do this work, I will take 1,000 steps towards you if you take one step towards me. Because I think this work is absolutely vital. If you want to be a decent human being and create good in the world, it's absolutely vital.
Wonderful. And I think, you know, yes, we will put the links in the comments below. But just to share one thing that for me is massive about this is we've talked a lot here about moving away from the pain and the suffering and how this knowledge and this understanding gets us there. But it's also fundamental in maturing into that position of eldership and wisdom to bring in these different archetypal energies in a balanced way. And in going through this work with you and having you as a mentor in this topic, I notice it coming out in every single area of my life, whether it be, you know, connecting with new business partners and being able to realize that in that moment they need me to step into my gorilla, my sovereign energy and organize things and take order, or whether we're in a creative meeting and I need my foxy magician flair to come through, or whatever it may be. But even in the home, like I had a situation a few weeks ago, actually, we had a Question Lab 42 retreat. We were hosting it here in Tenerife. And I was just in a very, you know, kind of warrior, sovereign kind of esque mood. I was get things done, stay organized. And my partner, the night before, she just had a dream where in her dream I'd cheated on her. Like, and it was just a dream. Nothing had happened, but we know how affecting dreams can be and how much they can impact. And she woke up like a bit delicate. And we spoke over the breakfast table in the morning, and she said, you know, I had this dream, and you know, I was just I'm feeling a little bit, and I was still in that kind of Wolfie, let's get stuff done. And I was quite dismissive immediately. And what I picked up on because of doing this work is I picked up immediately on the fact that she was taken aback by that. And I realized in that moment she needed that connection. She needed that sheep energy. You need to step forward and be the lover. And I identified it very quickly, again, because of the training, moved into it, gave her a hug, shared some love. We spoke very lovingly for a few minutes, and amazing, completely fixed, completely remedied. And then I was able to then move out of that, go back into my more proactive, get things done energy. And this wasn't something which then sat with her for the rest of the day while she was sitting there thinking about this in her mind. And when I see the application of this and how broad it can be, in personal development, I like doing something. I like that question. What is the one thing that we can do that by virtue of doing it is going to make everything else either easier or not necessary? And this falls into that category for me because it impacts everything.
Everything. So I'm going to answer your question in two ways. So first of all, it doesn't matter what game you're playing in life. Money game, health game, business game, being promoted at work game, parenting, property, starting a new business. It doesn't matter what game it is. Every single game that you're playing in your life that you care about is impacted by this work positively. Every single one. This is not just about the relationship game. This is about the fabric of your existence. Mm-hmm. The second thing I want to say is that, we've been talking mostly about breakdowns. What do you think shows up when there's less breakdowns? Connection, more laughter, more intimacy, more deliciousness, more productivity, more compassion, more patience. All the juicy wanderlust shows up. And if juicy wanderlust doesn't work for you, results. You'll produce more results in your life. So it depends what you want. Like if you're the fox, there'll just be more freedom, more lightness, more play, more feeling safe. There'll be more workability. There'll just be more workability in your life, in your family, with your children, in your home, with your partner. So each of the four archetypes has a different outcome that they want, and they get it. And on the grander scale of your own life, that the developmental imperative of the human existence is maturation. It's not something we can opt out of. And I think of it simply as the journey to eldership. And it's now, it doesn't matter what age you are, your path to eldership is happening right now in every decision that you make. And I just want to be really clear with all of you listening, like, I'm not particularly inspired by the idea of growing up in the way that I understood it as a kid. Like, I want to be blown away by the imprint of a leaf on the pavement in autumn. I want to be able to laugh the full belly laugh at the ridiculousness of life. I hope I'm dancing in my 80s. Like, I don't want to lose my Peter Pan playfulness. But the path to eldership, don't be put off by that as a sort of a losing your playfulness and your sense of humor process. That's not it at all. It's seeing the world clearly. And my definition of eldership is simply that every member of the community from 3 years old to 83 years old wants to come to you and is able to share their deepest shame and vulnerability because they trust your listening and they trust your response. And that's only available if you live an open-minded, awareness-gathering life of curiosity, where you don't shy away from the feedback of the challenges of your life. And the thing about relationships is that's where the challenges show up, because that's where we're most invested. Mm. It's like there is no Shangri-La in relationships. Don't let Disney fool you. There's no happily ever after. It's hopefully challenge, overcome the challenge, have some respite, face the next challenge, overcome the challenge, have some nice respite, have a nice holiday, have a good time, deal with the next challenge. Like, that's just the way it is. And I'd much rather deal with the nature of this challenge-based, growth-centric experience in a profoundly respectful relationship where it's understood. So, if you have any designs on being an elder or a grandparent, that your grandchildren just like, you are that grandparent that those your grandchildren speak about long after your passing. They speak about you in hallowed terms because you made that profound difference, because they felt understood by you. If that motivates you on any level, then, for me, at some point I hope to become a grandfather. But for me, it's being an elder to my community and to the people that I work with that motivates me massively. But I can't be, Joe Rogan says, like, nothing irritates me more than an old moron. Like, I don't want to be old and dumb. Like, we need to gather awareness. Like, it's happening right now. So we're digressing slightly, but in the immediate term, this work will make a profound difference to your understanding of yourself and your partner and your children, anyone that you care about. You'll massively reduce breakdowns. And what comes in that place is joy and laughter and intimacy and connection and fondness and results. And then in longer term, you might just become the best version of yourself, not in some grandiose self-development kind of way, just as a natural byproduct of doing your work.
Beautiful. It's a very beautiful way to end a very constructive conversation, I think.
It's been a pleasure.
It really has been. It really has been. So, as we said earlier, we'll pop the links in the comments so people can click and connect.
Yeah, and I really meant what I said about send me an email. If you're watching this and you're inspired and you want to do the work, send me an email. It'll be a pleasure to meet.
We'll pop your email down there as well, so it's nice and easy and organized for everybody. But on that note, Rory, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you soon.